Soundwave Studios. This is the rehearsal studio where many of the Bay Area thrash bands have jammed for a lot of years. And wanted to come here and see it for myself for a long time. So let's go in. Testament, that's a good start. Exodus. En Vogue, not very thrash.
Thrash is one of the fastest and most aggressive metal subgenres, and for many people, it doesn't even sound like music. Even for some die-hard metal fans, it's too heavy. So how did this extreme style of music gain such a huge fan base, producing some of metal's biggest bands like Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer? And why has it remained so vital, while other subgenres have become extinct? Thrash emerged from the underground in the early 80s and was much more extreme than metal styles that came before it, containing graphic lyrics about warfare, human suffering, and even serial killers. But before I explore the evolution of thrash, I want to know what kind of people were inspired to create this music.
We were just living out our twisted fantasies that were illegal to carry out in real life. So now a day goes by, I don't want to kill somebody. Fortunately, the criminal justice system frowns upon such things.
I'm one of the easiest going dudes you'll ever see hanging out, and you know this. But you put me in traffic and I'm a death row criminal. And I save that hatred and apply it to Slayer lyrics in the weirdest ways, you know?
Was your experience as a youngster feeding into the need to create faster, aggressive, intense music?
I don't know that what happened to me as a kid can drive anybody to do anything but kill their parents. For me, what drove me to want to play metal music was simply I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be a part of things.
My nickname is AD Dave, you know, because I'm a little hyper. If I'm still hyperactive at 45, at 16, 17, I must have been whacked. I think a combination of that and the enjoyment of punk music, whether it was Circle Jerks, Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat, that just fueled what I think I had already.
One of the things that defines thrash metal in the early 80s is a sense of seriousness, a kind of austerity, influenced by punk. Not necessarily always by the music of punk, but perhaps by some of the attitude of punk. Punk was born in part from frustration. Punk emerged at a time of great loss of confidence in the West about where the world was going.
When thrash started in the early 80s, Thatcher and Reagan were in charge. And we had a highly conservative, very restrictive kind of society. And if you're a teenager, especially a teenage male, yuck, you don't want to live in a place where they are in charge. This made males feel like they had to fight against the system just to stay in place. And that kind of aggression leads to a sense of wanting to be louder and faster.
If you loved punk, why was it that you decided to play thrash metal instead of just becoming a punk guitarist?
Well, for me, musicianship was really important. You didn't really have great guitar players in punk. You didn't really have great musicians in punk. You had great songs, but as a musician, I wanted to do more, and it seemed like thrash provided the possibility to apply the musicianship that I'd worked so hard on to the attitude of punk.
Thrash metal requires dexterity and virtuosity, but thrash musicians didn't find these qualities in punk music. The other main influence on thrash was a group of bands that emerged from England in the late 70s, called the New Wave of British heavy metal.
What was it about the new wave of British heavy metal that you were attracted to?
Well, it was the energy. First and foremost, there was a different energy. The new wave of British heavy metal was basically hard rock metal's answer to the punk movement. There were a bunch of the metal dudes that took the energy and the spirit of punk and made the riffs heavier, made the riffs more intricate, and there was just a different level of just kind of musical weight to it.
I actually started as a musician was with the British invasion. As far as my guitar playing style, it was pretty much crafted around the new wave of British heavy metal. Thank God for England, or I wouldn't be able to play a note.
There was certainly an aggression and intensity to like Priest and Maiden and Motorhead that hadn't existed in music until those bands came. Listening to Sabbath, the godfathers of heavy metal, still some of their music was really rooted in the blues. For me, Priest swept all the blues out of their music. That was heavy metal.
Why were you driven to take these influences and turn it into something new?
Did I know we were doing anything new? No. We were just basically ride the coattails of giants like Maiden and Priest and them and just do our own little twisted Bay Area version of it, you know, which was take the epic songs of them and we change it to about killing people and like that.
Thrash wasn't just a mixture of punk and the new wave of British heavy metal. Its screeching vocals and ultra-fast rhythm guitar made it a unique musical style. But perhaps its most unique characteristic was the relentless beat of the double bass drum. So where did this come from? And why did it become essential to the sound of thrash?
Maybe you could tell me why the double bass is important to the sound of thrash.
I think it brings a level of excitement to the music. Instead of just going boo, ga, do, ga, I mean going... It's just more intense. And to hear that low end thumping, especially with the guitars or if it's complementing what's going on, I think that's the true identity of thrash myself.
One of the things that the double bass drum does is it breaks the monotony of that very fast bass, snare, bass, snare, bass, snare. Adding double bass creates a sense of variety into the music, and it creates a rhythmic complexity, and it creates a sense of pace. It adds relentlessness and propulsion to the music.
Where did you hear the double bass style before you started creating it yourself?
From Motorhead was the first time I heard double bass done at that pattern. I've heard of other double bass drummers, but I don't think they did anything like that at that tempo and that style of beat.
The drummer that introduced me to that double bass type of thing was Phil Taylor from Motorhead. When I first heard Overkill in early 1979, that was just what blew my head off.
The double bass playing that you used on the song Overkill, can you tell me how you came up with that?
I just got a brand new kit, and so I was practicing on my double bass drums, and I was just going, you know, like that. And Eddie and Lemmy happened to arrive while I was doing that, and according to them, they said they stood outside the room, and they both said, oh, that's good, you know, to each other.
And one day, me and Eddie just came in the room while he was practicing his double bass drums and wrote Overkill, you know.
Motorhead kind of set in motion this kind of impulse or drive to play faster, louder.
Well, it certainly helped a lot, yeah.
Why did you want to play fast?
I don't know, it was just like it seemed like a good idea at the time, you know. I mean, we play at about 1,000 miles an hour now compared with that.
So you guys are getting faster with 8?
Seems to be, yeah. I mean, we want to get off stage and have a rest, you know, and get back in our wheelchairs.
Some people call Motorhead a thrash metal band.
Yes, they do indeed.
And why do you think they do that?
I haven't got a clue, really. I don't know. I mean, I only ever associate the word thrash with what your dad did to you, you know, when he took his belt off. Whack. I mean, I still don't quite know how it worked its way into the music genre. I did see and hear other bands that seemed to be playing incredibly fast. When we first saw Metallica was when they supported us, Christ, I think it was 1982. And I remember at the time thinking, what kind of music are they playing? Because it was like so fast.
Many people regard Metallica as the first thrash metal band. So how did they get started? And why did their sound connect with so many fans? When people think of thrash, they generally think of the Bay Area. But that's not where it started. I've come to LA to meet with Brian Slagle, head of Metal Blade Records, to find out how he and Metallica's Lars Ulrich helped kickstart thrash metal in this city.
We all lived, breathed, eat, slept 24 hours a day metal. It was a scene, it was a culture, it was a movement. And we all did anything we could. I couldn't play an instrument, I was terrible at it, so the one thing I could do was try to help expose this to other people.
Los Angeles at that time was full of FM radio, and it wasn't my bag. So there was a Michael Schenker show up at the place called the Country Club, up by where Brian Slagle lived.
So I went to the show, and after the show, I was in the parking lot and saw a kid wearing a Saxon European tour shirt. Now, nobody in LA at that point knew who Saxon was, so I ran up to the kid and said, "Where did you get that t-shirt?" He said, "Oh, I just moved here from Europe, you know, I'm into this scene." And I said, "Oh my God, I'm into this scene too."
Yeah. Brian was a mogul in the making, and he wanted to make a compilation record of the heavier local LA bands, and me and Hetfield drove up with our little Fostex cassette tape, and he did a good job, Brian, of like not vomiting as he was hearing our really badly recorded version of Hit the Lights, and Hit the Lights ended up on the first Metal Massacre album, even if there was one additional T in the spelling of Metallica. And that was sort of how Metallica got its start way back.
The Metallica song Hit the Lights on the Metal Massacre compilation marked the beginning of thrash metal. But in the early 80s, LA was known for a totally different style of metal, glam metal. So how did these two styles of metal coexist?
You had to be in one corner or the other. You're either in the glam metal category or you're in the heavier category. The heavier category just kind of got heavier and heavier. You had Metallica and Omen and, you know, Bitch, and then Slayer came along after that. The way the hair metal bands presented themselves was alien to us. We wanted to be the anti-rat, the anti-poison.
Funny story I've heard too is that you guys did wear a little bit of makeup at one point.
Yeah, we did. But, you know, that's part of being in LA. You gotta wear makeup of some sort. We didn't want to present ourselves like that, so we said, all right, eyeliner, demons, not necessarily Alice Cooper, but the antithesis of what was happening in LA.
Yeah, Slayer wore makeup, okay, but no, I mean, we just wore black eyeliner, which we were doing was copying Ozzy at the time because it looked evil. But it wasn't long after that that we were convinced that we didn't need that.
In the folklore, it's suggested that there was a lot of animosity between the hair and thrash metal camps. Is that true?
That's not folklore. That's real, because the hair band stood for glam. I mean, I look at it like glam is the fleas on the camel's balls, and thrash was kind of like a flea bomb.
Motley Crue, Rat, Steeler, so on. They sort of represented everything that we were against. They were like the kings of the Sunset Strip. It was not easy trying to force our way into that whole setup. It was very lonely, that I can tell you. It was very lonely to be Metallica in LA in 1982. There was not a lot of love for the type of thing that we were doing. And so we started playing some shows up in San Francisco every 3-4 weeks, and instantly things started happening. We got a following. So we packed up our and finished our day jobs, and we were in San Francisco permanently from early February of 1983.
Do all your audiences react the same in the different places you play?
Up in San Francisco, they're a lot better. A lot better. They're in LA. Yeah, LA sucks. 1, 2, 3. LA sucks!
A small underground metal scene was developing in the Bay Area during the early 80s. But it wasn't until Metallica arrived in 1983 that thrash started to explode.
I remember we all went to see this band Metallica play at the Keystone Berkeley and walked in. I just never saw energy like that in my life. I just, like, the crowd even tripped me out. It scared me.
It was just turbocharged music. It was so much heavier than punk or metal that we'd heard put together.
San Francisco was so embracing of this heavy music, and Metallica felt that acceptance from this crowd of hungry metalheads up here that weren't really affected by what was happening in LA at the time.
People in the Bay Area, you know, when the first time we played with Slayer, you know, they had the eyeliner. That had to go just to play a show with Exodus because our fans were not going to stand for it. They love Slayer, but they're like, you can't wear makeup at an Exodus show.
It was just a whole different universe up there. I mean, it was a whole different vibe. There was passion. The kids were like us. They were just kids in leather and denim jackets. We just instantly fit in, and we felt so at home.
It was like a small pack of dogs with all of us bands like Forbidden, Exodus, and Death Angel, Testament. There was 20 metal bands, you know, so it was like a pack of rabid dogs. And we were all at the same parties and the same shows and talked about the same things.
Ruthie's Inn became this mecca for people to go to, no matter what was playing, whether it was punk, metal, any night, it'd be chock full of metalheads and kids into punk. And this little place became the marriage of the two genres.
I think one thing the Bay Area doesn't get enough of is recognition for actually being the first crossover region in America, not New York. If you look back at some of the old Ruthie's Inn flyers, there was constantly like metal bands playing with punk rock guys.
We were on one at one time, and he was calling it a cross-cultural event. It even said on the flyer, a cross-cultural event. And it was like us, and then there was punk bands.
One of the hugest things I think about thrash metal and its cross-fertilization with punk rock and hardcore is the way that the vibe of a metal show changed. Thrash was when metal discovered moshing, basically, and discovered stage diving. You know, you go to a Slayer show and it's like being caught in a prison riot. Before, you would go to a metal show and it'd be a lot of head banging, you know, maybe you raise your fist, you know, flash the horns. But you go to a thrash show, the first thing with the thrash show is if you're wearing these, you leave these at home, because these are getting broken.
I've listened to thrash metal since the early 80s. The first demo tape I got from the Bay Area was the first Legacy demo. And I heard about it in a magazine called Metal Forces through this section called Pen Bangers. And Pen Bangers was like pen pals for headbangers. And I got the demo through tape trading.
In the era of the internet, people would not understand getting magazines and zines that had ads in the bottom, tape trader into, and you name like 4 or 5 bands and you give your address, and people will send you tapes, you send them tapes. You didn't ask for money, you didn't expect anything.
You sat down and wrote a letter. Can you imagine? And you put a cassette tape in there that you dubbed 37 times to the point where you could hardly hear what was going on. But that's how the music got around. It was the way that you could share this stuff and find out about new bands. And then the good stuff got lots of name checks and those pen pal letters that we all sat and wrote to each other. I mean, it's a long lost art.
We were already sending out live tapes of us, and from that, we went out there on the Kill As One demo, and we hit the stage, and people were yelling for Death Angel. They sang Kill As One, they knew Thrashers. It's crazy, and this was all from underground tape trading, which made the scene. It was the organic, analog internet.
Through tape trading, thrash metal's fan base was starting to grow across America and around the world. And when Metallica's No Life to Leather demo landed in a flea market in the suburbs of New York, thrash metal got its first record deal through upstart label Megaforce Records.
First time we heard Metallica was when a fella came into our store. He just came back from San Francisco. I think he saw them at the MAB, and he had these tapes from the show. The first second we heard it, you know, like Marsh and I were both like stunned.
It just had such balls, such guts. I just remember being blown away by it, really just, holy
See, America didn't have a wave of heavy metal, really. Metallica sure answered that, and it was like the new improved American sound.
It was one of those legendary, he hears it, drops what he's doing, runs to the payphone, calls me, and within a few minutes there's just a love fest brewing, and it's come out east, let's make a record together, the whole 9 yards.
So you started Megaforce because no one would sign Metallica?
Nobody wanted Metallica. Nobody knew what to do with it. We went to all the majors, and they just squirmed. They just didn't know what to make of it and what to do with it. John and I just really believed in that record. I mean, we'd spent every minute in the studio, we knew it inside out, and we really believed in it.
We have a debut album out on Megaforce Records. It's called Kill 'Em All. We're glad to kill all you tonight. Who wants this?
By the early 80s, many thrash bands had released independent records, and the scene was expanding beyond the Bay Area. But in August 1984, Metallica, Anthrax, and Raven played New York's Roseland Ballroom, bringing thrash out of the underground and onto the radar of major labels.
It was incredible to get on stage and open our show at Death Rider and see 3,000 kids all headbanging and singing the words to our songs, and we couldn't believe it. It was insane. It was a culmination of 3 years of hard work to that point, and rehearsing 7 nights a week and just busting our asses and just trying to make this happen.
We promoted that show. There were 3,500 people, and everybody was there from all the record labels. And they had to sit there and see these people who they never heard of play to such radical devotees, because the crowd was nuts. And when James climbed up on the monitors, I looked at the crowd and said, guess who's back in town? Yo, place went nuclear.
It was the biggest show up till that point. Certainly the biggest show that any of us had been involved in. And this super friendly guy just shows up backstage and got a big smile on his face.
I just made a beeline backstage, went past security, went past everything, practically bolted the door to backstage. They knew that I was ecstatic about the music and that I worked for a major label.
And he, God bless him, wanted to sign Metallica to Elektra Records. Imagine that.
That was the biggest thing in the world. The idea of signing to a major label, that's a f***ing dream come true. And Raven got their deal with Atlantic and Metallica got their deal with Elektra. We were still on Megaforce. We didn't get a deal yet. Although we got scouted that night, it just took a couple of more months, for us to get signed. But yeah, you could basically say all 3 bands, signed their major deals from playing that Roseland show.
All of a sudden, the major labels became, hey, what's going on here? There's people selling lots of records. We should be involved in this. Slayer started to get pretty big, and major labels, they're all coming and descending upon them like crazy, and they eventually signed with Rick Rubin's label. But when Slayer left and signed with the major, it's like, hey, this is a great thing for these guys to take that next step.
How did things change for you in transitioning from Metal Blade to Def Jam?
We got a tour bus. We were traveling around in a van, and getting into a tour bus was luxury. The hotels were much nicer. We weren't staying at hotels that were rent hourly.
It was kind of a crazy time. I don't think we slowed down long enough to even take it in. All of a sudden, we were eating and drinking better, and we liked it.
One of the executives opens up his drawer, and there's a mirror full of Coke, and I'm like, we've arrived, David. And he looks at me and like, yeah, high five, and them giving us champagne and a box full of Nike high tops. And that's why you look at any of those pictures, we were in these rotten blue jeans and disgusting, filthy, stained T-shirts, but God damn it, we had brand new shoes. So we got them from Capitol. They gave us brand new Nikes.
There's a new way. I'll be the first in line, but it better work this time.
By the mid-'80s, thrash was flourishing. Backed by major label support, thrash bands were touring the world and creating their biggest, boldest, and most influential records, culminating in what many consider the greatest thrash record of all time, Slayer's Rain and Blood, an album that revolutionized the sound of thrash metal.
were trying to find ourselves at that time, and finding our sound was key to that record. I mean, I don't want to make any comparisons, but that record has magic like, let's say, AC/DC's Highway to Hell, where that album, there's something about it. It has some kind of life to it.
We were such fans of Merciful Fate and Venom, we didn't know you could do a record without reverb. And Andy and Rick Rubin put every song, every instrument right here, from beginning to end. No frills, no bells and whistles, you know, it's, here it is.
Yeah.
You're either gonna like it or you're gonna hate it. And luckily we wrote good enough songs where everybody liked it.
That's what we did on that record. You know, it's not a very ambient record. It's all just right in your face, because a lot of the metal records that I had heard up to that point, they tended to be a little thinner on the low end. A lot of the double kick stuff was like a typewriter, like, but I always felt the whole thing could just be ballsier and heavier. And the idea was to have the listener kind of be a punching bag, you know, and to have this just go pow, 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 pow.
There was music that was finally beginning to make money. For the bands, for the record companies, for the concert promoters. Metallica and Slayer made a lot of money right from the start. So it just became natural that the other record companies wanted their own thrash band. You know, I mean, even Death Angel ultimately got signed to a major label.
How did things change once you guys were on a major label?
We just had a much bigger budget, and we were able to create a really well-produced album. We had a lot more direction.
We recorded it down in LA. We had a furnished apartment that we lived in, you know, the whole time all together, and just concentrated
Immersing
on
in the project.
in a huge way, and it was just amazing.
Major labels are spending a lot of money to record records and do videos and tour support, you know, promotion. It's always this growing process. You're going to sell more and more and more. More tours get bigger, bigger production. You know, it's just this big growing machine. So metal really was going pretty strong.
Suddenly this huge scene of bands making this really great music, and they're all doing it at a very high level, doing it very well. All of a sudden, I got a demo from Voivod. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. I got a demo from Sacrifice. I heard Sodom and Hellhammer and Celtic Frost and thought, oh my God, these are amazing. When you see that happening on a global level, and you see really good quality bands coming from everywhere, it's like, okay, this is not just our little thing in our backyard, it's everywhere.
Thrash was now metal's fastest growing subgenre. Thrash albums were going gold and platinum, videos were in regular rotation on MTV, and its fans were now an international subculture. It was even giving the old guard of metal a run for its money.
All right, who are you guys here to see, Ozzy or Metallica?
Metallica.
How come?
It's better than Ozzy. Better than Ozzy, yeah. Yeah, they're gonna blow Ozzy off the stage. Metallica! Metallica! The new, the heavy, good heavy
Big
metal.
thrash.
Yeah, definitely thrash. Definitely thrash.
When I was a teenager, the ultimate dream tour was the Clash of the Titans, featuring Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer on the same bill. But this tour also foreshadowed a major transition in heavy music in America, because the opening band was future grunge superstars Alice in Chains.
Probably the most ironic thing about that tour is Alice in Chains opened it, and they became the next thing, bigger than thrash will ever become. I didn't see the grunge thing overturning life as we knew it.
It's strange because the Clash of the Titans tour was the peak and also the guillotine for thrash metal, because it's as big as it was gonna get at that point, really. I mean, you put the three of us together, Anthrax, Slayer, Megadeth, you put us on tour, we're selling out sheds and arenas, and then at the same time, where do you go from there?
Where do you go when you've created this incredibly fast, intricate music, but it's also very dense? It doesn't say, obviously, where you go next. And I think the Clash of the Titans reflected the point where it was as most commercially popular, but also where it was just starting to run out of ideas.
I think the 90s were hard on thrash metal because, you know, basically it had been played out. There's only so many times you can rewrite the same record over and over and over again.
Have you ever felt confined or constrained by that label, Thrash?
Yes, I believe that label, while it fits us very well, I think it's like a pair of tight-fitting shoes. I think that it would be much cooler for us to be monikered Megadeth and left at that. It's definitely thrash, but it's so much more.
We just felt that there was nothing more we could do. We had a fear of repetition, and we had a fear of getting stuck, and we saw with some of the other metal bands that were our peers, that there was a kind of a status quo element, a sameness to it that we just felt was not for us.
In the early 90s, thrash bands started to change their sound, and Metallica's Black Album was the band's most accessible record to date and was a huge commercial success, selling over 22 million copies.
First notes of Enter Sandman, my jaw dropped and I said, thrash has now to its credit a classic all-time record. All time. You know, that could compete with anything else that was classic.
Anybody says a Black Album's not a good record is high. You know, I mean, it was awesome.
They made a record that sounded as big as any pop album.
I can remember the day when I first heard Enter Sandman. Wow, you know, it just like blew me away. It was all there.
So why did I feel betrayed?
Because you were betrayed. You could feel what they did. I mean, they went for the gold, they got the gold, but your sense of what metal wasn't exactly in the sound. They brought in an audience who didn't have a clue about metal.
When you use the word betrayal, that's a very strong word. I can certainly understand that people would feel, you know, oh my God, Enter Sandman, nothing else matters, what happened? But it was what we needed to do for our own sanity, because if we had made Injustice for All Part 2, then that would have been the sellout, I'm telling you.
Honestly, I don't want, well, I should say, what the heck? Yeah, I threw it down the stairs. So what the hell is this? I couldn't believe it. I felt that the thrash in thrash metal was gone. When I saw that, I felt it now conform to the MTV style of music promotion.
I never opened myself this way. Life is ours, we live it our way.
What rules of thrash did they break on the Black Album?
Ballads. Well, for thrash, ballads no good. That's against the law. They might as well use keyboards and have a violin, too. You don't do ballads.
I remember going with my buddy to some dance club. Don't ask me why. And I'm like freaking out. I'm going, this is Metallica. They're playing Metallica at a dance club. What the hell's going on here? This isn't right.
Forever trusting who we are. No, nothing else matters.
When the Black Album came out and sold 5 bajillion copies, that became, for all these other major labels, that became the benchmark for, okay, we have a heavy metal band, how do we make them Metallica?
I think many of us tried to follow that fork in the road, the Metallica fork. Everybody, you know, thought maybe if we go a little more like that, we'll garner that audience and we might, you know, be able to follow that same career trajectory. Slayer stayed true to what they did. It absolutely shows that it worked.
The record company did come up to us and discuss things and what they wanted to do. But if it didn't sit well with the guys in the band, with all of us, we wouldn't go with it. We don't want to change. We are who we are. This is the way we play. This is the style of songs that we like to write. If you're going to tell us to do other, you know, we're going to tell you to off.
This whole thing about the sellout and the, you know, being true and all this stuff, I felt there were a lot of contradictions in that, because I felt that there were people that were selling out by being the same, and that were selling out by just giving the fans what they wanted.
I know Lars mentioned years ago, and I think he referenced us, about painting yourself into a corner and having nowhere to go, and that's why Metallica kind of became a rock band for a while. But if I'm in a corner, I like my corner. It's the coolest corner I've ever been in.
While While Slayer stayed the course through the 90s, maintaining their thrash style, many thrash bands changed their sound, bowing to the pressure of major labels.
Usually the first record for the major would be pretty good because they'd kind of be left to their own to make it. And then after they did that, all of a sudden those influences, like, well, you know, you need to have a hit song. You need to look this way. Your video needs to look this way.
My least favorite album, Force of Habit, we actually did, for the first time in my career, tried to write more for what I thought the label wanted. It's the first time I didn't write for myself.
The songs we think are cool and hip, they're like, no, 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 it's the ballad we're gonna push and do the video. And we're like, what? That was the big change, because there's someone who has the money who's telling us what product they want us to do, how they want us to write, how they want us to be presented.
I'm not one to say where my feelings are going when they wither away. Oh, I pray to see.
Some wrong decisions were made along the way. It always felt like we weren't quite where we were supposed to be. You know, it's not good musicianship that makes a successful band. It's good decision making.
Bands were getting dropped off major labels, and we were breaking up, and we're like, oh, great, you know, well, we're probably gonna be off Atlantic soon anyhow. So at that time was a bad, dark time for us as a band, because some we'd starting was ending.
I always said if this became like a job I didn't like, I wouldn't do it, you know, and I didn't like it anymore. So I stayed home. Joined the PTA. Scared the shit out of the other parents at the little PTA meetings. If I had it all do over again, you know, I would just continue writing songs about killing people.
By the mid-90s, many thrash bands had abandoned the movement and the genre had stagnated. This gave rise to several new subgenres that were even more extreme than thrash, like death metal, grindcore, and black metal. Styles that were completely void of melody and featured blast beat drumming and ultra-low guttural vocals. But just when you thought thrash metal was dead, it re-emerged in a place you'd least expect.
When we started out putting out records and getting the chance to record stuff, the thrash stuff was dying out in one way. You know, there was a bit of stagnation in that scene. It was something that was lost, that we didn't find anymore. You know, and that was the eagerness of the early thrash stuff. It was missing for us in a way, and we were trying to incorporate everything we liked into what we did. Darkness Descends, Rain in Blood, Master of Puppets. We were listening to all these classic records and trying to figure out what made them big in our hearts, trying to make it our own product, but still, you know, with this goal to be important in one way, to make a mark, you know.
What are the elements of the Gothenburg sound borrowed from what thrash established?
Well, it borrows the speed of thrash, and it pedals back a bit from death metal's complete elimination of melody and harmony and things like that. To a certain extent, the Gothenburg thrash melodic death metal sound is a reinterpretation, if you like, of an earlier period in metal history, when thrash still had its connection with mainstream heavy metal.
Why is that so important to you to have metal music that can be pretty heavy and pretty extreme at times, but also have that melodic aspect?
I guess it's always been something that Swedes like. Folk music is very melodic. It's always been a very important part of the music that we have here. And if you can incorporate that with the feeling you get when you listen to an awesome Slayer song or a great Metallica song, I really, really love the aggression. It gets me pumped up. That feeling, if you can mix that with the melodies in there and put some hooks in there, it's in everything that we write, we always think about that. It can't only be rhythm-based. It needs to be melodies in there.
While the Swedish or Gothenburg thrash scene was incorporating a lot of the influence of death metal, it is sort of taking metal back to that underlining theme in thrash that we're not just the heaviest, ugliest, meanest band, but we can actually play and we got chops.
weren't the only ones to put thrash back on the metal map. By the early 2000s, Lamb of God, a band from Richmond, Virginia, became the next force in extreme music and helped reinvigorate thrash in America.
Let's get that dance floor started!
We were all huge fans of the thrash movement. That's what we grew up on. We were all kind of these suburban white kids that, somehow found this music and felt like we were a part of something. And, instead of playing soccer or being on the chess team, this was our group of people that we fit in with. Very much that was what we were emulating. Bands like Megadeth and Testament and Slayer. The original thrash movement, we came long after that, and long after the support for that had died down. But I think we've been a big part of the revival of that movement, bringing some of those elements back into metal that haven't really been heard in the same way in 20 years.
Was it exciting to hear younger bands like Lamb of God create music that had that intensity?
I hadn't heard anything awesome in a long time, and it might have just lit my fire again. Having a second awakening or reawakening going, I just been asleep for 12 years, and I gotta get back to what the I was doing to start with.
Lamb of God tracked me down and asked me to play on their album Ashes of the Wake. And I thought, okay, this could be interesting.
And he comes down to the studio, and he's looking around, and he's, I just expected like a bunch of dudes in jumpsuits and makeup and a mess. And he's like, you guys look like we did. Like we're doing it again. He's like, I can't wait to get in there and do this.
Oh, it's exciting to feel like you've actually had an influence, that somebody was listening that whole time.
It does make you feel good, though, to have people you respect as musicians tell you that your music actually had something to do with shaping them musically. It makes it feel like you were doing it for a reason.
Where is Exodus at today?
In a good place. Band's hungry, the band's healthy and drug-free, and we're driven, motivated, and out to prove a point that we're one of the very first two that did this, and we're the best at doing it today.
Why do you think thrash continues to be a viable form of music today?
It's just such an amazing release to play, to listen to, and it's undeniable. As long as there's generations coming up that are into rebellion, this genre will always have some validity to it.
I think the music is first and foremost. I think the lyrics are socially relevant. If you pay attention, you get something out of it, and if you don't care, you get something out of it because it's great music.
We're gonna go completely full circle here. Rebellion.
As long as young people are angry and confused and don't know who they are, and that will probably be forever, then some of them are going to be attracted to music that makes you bang your head and makes you feel that your anger's okay and that you can deal with your anger while still expressing it at the same time. In that respect, thrash metal is ageless.
The thrash stuff and the harder metal stuff survives because when you're fortunate enough to not be part of anything that's too fashionable, you have the opportunity to stick around as all the other fashions and things wither away, It's last man standing.
Suicide, I've already died. It's just the funeral I've been waiting for. Cyanide, living dead inside. Makes me sick to death forevermore.